The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before what was supposed to be the most beautiful wedding I had ever helped plan. I was reviewing final invoices for the Rosewood Estate ceremony. $130,000 of pure elegance, designed to make my granddaughter Sophia's dreams come true, when my phone buzzed with a notification that would shatter my heart and change everything. Grandma Eleanor, Brandon and I have made a difficult decision. Please don't come to the wedding. Your presence will create drama and ruin our special day. We need this to be about us, not family conflicts. Hope you understand, Sophia. I read the message 3 times. Each time the words felt more surreal, more painful. 24 years of loving this child. 8 years of being her primary family after her father died. And now I was being uninvited from the wedding I was paying for, because my presence would create drama. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and stared at the stack of vendor contracts spread before me. The Rosewood Estate booking confirmation, $45,000. Platinum Catering Services, $32,000. Enchanted Gardens Floral Arrangements, $18,000. Symphony Strings Quartet, $8,000. Bella Vista Photography and Videography, $15,000. The Designer Cake from Artisan Confections, $4,500. Luxury Linens, Upgraded Lighting, Premium Bar Service, Transportation, dozens of carefully chosen details. All of it added up to the most expensive gift I had ever given anyone. 3 months earlier, Sophia had come to me with tears in her eyes. She and Brandon couldn't afford the wedding they dreamed of on their combined influencer income. She'd shown me photos of the Rosewood Estate, breathtaking vineyards, golden light, the kind of venue booked solid for 2 years unless someone paid a premium for last-minute availability. "Grandma," she'd said softly, "I know it's a lot of money, but this is the only chance we'll ever have to get married somewhere this beautiful. Brandon's followers are expecting something spectacular. If we can't deliver, it could hurt both our careers." I wrote the check that same day, not because I cared about Brandon's social media career, which I frankly didn't understand, but because Sophia had never asked me for anything significant before, and because, after selling my boutique chain 5 years earlier, I had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Now, apparently, the granddaughter I raised after her parents died in a car accident when she was 16 didn't want me present to witness the celebration I was funding. I picked up my phone and called Sophia directly. It went straight to voicemail. Unsurprising, since she and Brandon often kept their phones on silent for content creation. "Sophia, it's Grandma," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I received your message about the wedding, and I'm confused. Could you please call me back so we can talk? I love you, sweetheart." An hour passed. No return call. I tried again. Same result. Finally, I sent a text. "Sophia, I need to understand what's happened. What family conflicts are you referring to? When have I ever created drama at your events?" The response came immediately. "Grandma, you know how you can be, always wanting to control everything and make things about yourself. Brandon thinks it would be better if you just celebrated with us from a distance." Something cold settled in my chest. That's when I knew this wasn't Sophia's decision. It was Brandon's. In the 3 years my granddaughter had been dating him, I had watched Brandon Walsh slowly isolate her. From friends who didn't fit his aesthetic, from family members who questioned his motives, from anyone who might threaten his influence over her choices. Brandon was 26. Devastatingly handsome in the way social media demanded. Blessed with superficial charm and absolutely no depth of character. He'd grown up wealthy in Silicon Valley, the son of tech executives who gave him everything except values. He parlayed that privilege into an Instagram following of over 2 million people who enjoyed watching him travel, dine at expensive restaurants, and dispense lifestyle advice funded by his parents' money. What he never offered was respect. Especially not for Sophia's family, particularly her middle-class grandmother, who built her wealth through decades of work instead of inheritance. He made subtle comments about my dated taste in restaurants, my traditional views on relationships, my involvement in decisions that should be left to the couple. I tolerated it all. For Sophia. And because I naively believed that marriage might mature him, I was wrong. I opened my laptop and began reviewing every vendor contract I had signed. Each one contained clear cancellation policies. Full refunds with 72 hours notice. Some required 48 hours. Others a full week. The wedding was still 3 weeks away. As I read, I realized Sophia and Brandon had made a critical error in timing. They had uninvited me before securing their financing, assuming family obligation and emotional pressure would keep me paying for a celebration I wasn't welcome to attend. They had miscalculated. Badly. I spent the next 2 hours documenting every expense tied to their wedding, building a detailed spreadsheet. Venue, catering, music, photography, florals, the engagement party I hosted at my home, the designer dress I purchased for Sophia, pre-wedding events, travel arrangements. The total, $127,470, nearly $130,000. For a wedding I was apparently too dramatic to attend. 3 a.m. I made my decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to enable the belief that family could be discarded once their financial utility ran out. If my presence would ruin their wedding, then my absence, financially, would honor their wishes perfectly. I opened my phone and began listing every vendor, every service provider, every person expecting payment for Sophia's dream day. Tomorrow morning I would make calls. Not to create drama, not for revenge, but to withdraw completely from a celebration that no longer included me. If Sophia and Brandon wanted a wedding free of family conflict, they were about to get exactly what they asked for. Some lessons are worth $130,000 to teach. And some grandmothers possess the financial power to make exclusion far more expensive than inclusion. Brandon Walsh was about to learn that disrespecting wealthy family members carries consequences far beyond hurt feelings. The wedding of his dreams was about to become the nightmare of his own making. I woke up Wednesday morning with the clarity that only comes after a difficult decision made in the quiet hours of the night. After brewing my coffee, I settled into my home office and spread the vendor contracts across my mahogany desk like a general preparing a strategic retreat. The first call I made was to my attorney, Patricia Wells, who had handled my business affairs for 15 years and knew exactly how to navigate contract cancellations without legal complications. Eleanor, let me make sure I understand this correctly. Your granddaughter has uninvited you from her wedding, which you are funding entirely, and you want to cancel all vendor agreements. That's correct, Patricia. I want to exercise every cancellation clause available, while staying within legal boundaries. If Sophia doesn't want me at her wedding, then she can plan and pay for her own. Eleanor, I have to ask, are you making this decision from hurt feelings or from sound judgment? Because once you cancel these vendors 3 weeks before the event, there will be no reasonable way to undo it. I considered Patricia's question while looking at the framed photograph of Sophia at her high school graduation, radiant, grateful, beaming as I applauded from the front row. 8 years of being her primary family, supporting her through college, celebrating every achievement, providing the love and stability she needed after losing her parents. Patricia, this is sound judgment. Sophia has chosen Brandon's influence over family relationships, and she needs to understand the consequences of that choice before she makes it permanent through marriage. All right, let me review these contracts and start making calls. A pause. Eleanor, most of these vendors will retain their deposits, but you should recover about 80% of your payments. I don't care about recovering money, Patricia. I care about ensuring that Sophia understands the value of family relationships before it's too late to repair them. After ending the call, I decided to make one final attempt at direct communication. I drove to the apartment Sophia shared with Brandon in downtown San Francisco, a trendy loft in a converted warehouse that perfectly suited their social media aesthetic. Sophia answered the door wearing one of Brandon's oversized designer hoodies, her expression already defensive, as if she'd been dreading this moment. Grandma Eleanor, I hoped you'd understand without us having to discuss this in person. Sophia, I need you to explain something to me. In what way have I created drama at your events? When have I ever made your celebrations about myself? It's not about specific incidents. It's about the dynamic you create with Brandon. He feels like you're always judging him, always questioning his decisions. He can't relax around you. Sophia, can you give me a concrete example of when I've judged Brandon or questioned his decisions? She went quiet, searching her memory for evidence that wasn't there. You ask a lot of questions about his business plans, about his income. I ask because you're planning to marry him and build a life together. Understanding his financial stability isn't judgment. It's practical family concern. Brandon says that's not your business. Brandon is correct that his finances aren't my business. But my granddaughter's financial security absolutely is. Especially when I'm funding her wedding to someone whose income comes from social media sponsorships that could disappear overnight. Sophia's expression shifted from defensive to irritated. I could see Brandon's influence in the way she reframed concern as control. Grandma, this is exactly what Brandon means. You don't trust that we know what's best for our own lives. Sophia, I've trusted your judgment completely until now. But uninviting me from your wedding, while expecting me to pay for it, suggests that your judgment has been compromised by someone who doesn't value family relationships. Brandon values family relationships. He just thinks we need boundaries with people who try to control our decisions. What decisions have I tried to control, Sophia? Silence again. Then Brandon appeared from the kitchen, carefully casual in athleisure wear. His perfectly styled hair engineered to look effortless. Eleanor, I didn't realize you were coming over. Sophia and I were just planning content for today's posts. Brandon, I came to understand why you believe my presence would create drama at your wedding. Look, Eleanor, I respect everything you've done for Sophia. But she's building a new life now. Sometimes old family dynamics interfere with a couple's fresh start. What old family dynamics are you referring to? Just typical grandmother-granddaughter stuff. You raised her, so naturally you want to maintain that parental role, even though she's an adult now. A chill settled in my chest. 8 years of being Sophia's primary family reduced to typical stuff. Brandon, I've never treated Sophia as anything other than an independent adult. But I've never stopped caring about her welfare and happiness. Right. But caring can become controlling if you're not careful. Sophia needs space to make her own decisions without worrying about how they affect your feelings. I see. And you believe my presence at your wedding would prevent her from doing that? It's more about the energy. Wedding days should be pure joy, not navigating complex family relationships. I looked at Sophia. She was nodding, accepting this explanation as truth. I realized she'd been taught to see closeness as conflict, loyalty as pressure. Sophia, do you agree that our relationship is too complex for your wedding day? Grandma, I just want everything to be perfect. Brandon's right. Weddings are stressful enough without family dynamics. What family dynamics would you be worried about? Just making sure everyone gets along. Making sure nobody feels criticized. There it was. No specifics. No history. Just anxiety planted where none had existed. Sophia, Brandon, I understand your decision. If you believe my absence will make your wedding day more perfect, I respect that choice. Relief washed over their faces. Thank you for understanding, Grandma. This doesn't mean we love you any less, Brandon added. Of course not. You're prioritizing your future together. I understand completely. In fact, I've already taken steps to ensure your wedding day will be exactly what you've envisioned, without any interference from me. They smiled, missing the warning embedded in my tone. That's wonderful, Eleanor. I think you'll find this strengthens family relationships in the long run. As I drove home, I reflected on two young people who believed discarding family was maturity rather than manipulation. In 6 hours, Patricia would begin canceling every vendor, every service, every detail they had planned but could not afford. Some lessons require consequences proportionate to the decision. And some young men learn too late that isolating a partner from wealthy family comes at a cost. By tomorrow, Brandon and Sophia would begin discovering just how expensive a perfect wedding is without my so-called dramatic presence. Thursday morning marked the start of the most systematically devastating series of phone calls I had ever overseen. Patricia arrived at 8 sharp, legal briefcase in hand, carrying the focused precision that had made her one of the most formidable attorneys in the Bay Area. Eleanor, I've reviewed every contract. The good news is you're fully protected legally. The challenging news is that this will be a logistical nightmare for everyone involved, including innocent vendors who've been planning this event for months. Patricia, I understand that this will create difficulties for service providers, but Sophia and Brandon created this situation by assuming they could exclude me while keeping my financial support. Understood? Let's start with the venue since that's the foundation for everything else. Patricia dialed the Rosewood Estate while I listened on speakerphone, my coffee growing cold as I prepared to dismantle the wedding of Sophia's dreams. Good morning. This is Patricia Wells, representing Eleanor Richardson regarding the Walsh-Richardson wedding scheduled for November 18th. Mrs. Richardson needs to cancel the venue booking immediately. Oh no. Is everything all right? That's one of our most elaborate bookings this year. Unfortunately, there have been irreconcilable family differences that make the event impossible to proceed as planned. I see. Well, according to our contract, Mrs. Richardson is entitled to a full refund minus a $5,000 processing fee, since we're more than 2 weeks from the event date. However, I should mention that the couple called us yesterday asking about upgrading several services and adding additional guests. Patricia and I exchanged glances. Brandon and Sophia were still planning upgrades to a wedding they had uninvited me from, apparently confident that I would continue funding their celebration regardless of their treatment. The booking is canceled effective immediately, Patricia said. Please send all refund paperwork to my office. Of course. Should I contact the couple directly about the cancellation? No. They'll be informed through appropriate channels. After ending the call, Patricia began working through the vendor list systematically. Each conversation followed a similar pattern. Initial shock, questions about the reason for cancellation, and eventual acceptance once it was clear the legal documentation supported our right to withdraw from all agreements. The catering company was particularly understanding. Mrs. Richardson, I have to say, in 30 years of wedding catering, I've learned that family conflicts that emerge before the wedding usually indicate much deeper problems. You may be saving everyone from a very expensive mistake. By noon, we had canceled the venue, catering, floral arrangements, music, photography, transportation, and cake. The luxury linens rental, upgraded lighting, premium bar service, and specialty decorations would all be returned to vendors scrambling to book other clients for the November 18th weekend. Eleanor, there's one more vendor I think you should call personally, Patricia said, consulting her notes. The Wedding Dress Boutique. Sophia's dress was an $8,000 custom creation, tailored specifically to her measurements. I felt a pang of sadness thinking about Sophia in her dream gown, one she'd selected during a shopping trip that had been one of our happiest afternoons together in months. Patricia, let me handle that call myself. I dialed Bella Boutique and spoke with Maria Santos, the owner who had worked with Sophia and me to create the perfect dress. Mrs. Richardson, I was just thinking about calling you. Sophia's dress is ready for final pickup, and it's absolutely stunning. She's going to be the most beautiful bride. Maria, I need to discuss a complication with the wedding. There have been family issues that require me to cancel my financial support for the event. Oh my goodness, what happened? Sophia and her fiancé have decided that my presence at the wedding would create problems, so they've uninvited me, while still expecting me to pay for their celebration. They uninvited you? The grandmother who's been handling all the wedding expenses. Exactly. So I'm withdrawing all financial support, which unfortunately includes the wedding dress. Mrs. Richardson, I completely understand your position. That dress is paid for and belongs to you legally until it's gifted to Sophia. What would you like me to do? Hold the dress until this situation is resolved. If Sophia wants to purchase it herself, she's welcome to do so. But I won't be gifting an $8,000 gown to someone who doesn't want me present to see her wear it. That seems entirely reasonable. In 20 years of bridal work, I've seen plenty of family drama, but I've never seen a bride exclude the person paying for her entire wedding. After ending the call, I realized that the financial cancellations were only the beginning of what Brandon and Sophia would face. The real consequences would begin when they discovered that their dream wedding had vanished, leaving them with 3 weeks to plan and fund an entirely new celebration. Patricia, when do you think they'll realize what's happened? Probably tomorrow, when vendors start calling them about canceled services and requesting new payment arrangements. And legally, there's nothing they can do to force me to reinstate the contracts? Nothing. You were the contracting party. You provided all payments, and you're exercising legitimate cancellation clauses. They have no legal recourse because they never had legal control. That afternoon, I received a text from Sophia. Grandma, I just want to make sure you're okay with everything we discussed yesterday. I know this is hard, but I think it's the right decision for everyone. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on simple acknowledgement. I'm fine with your decision, Sophia. I hope your wedding day is everything you and Brandon envisioned. What I didn't mention was that their wedding day was rapidly becoming something entirely different from what they had envisioned, because they had envisioned a celebration funded by someone they decided was too problematic to invite. Patricia, what happens if they contact vendors directly and discover the cancellations? Then they'll have to explain to everyone why the person paying for their wedding. They planned and paid for themselves, which is what they should have done from the beginning if my involvement was truly problematic. As Patricia packed up her legal documents and prepared to leave, I realized the next phase of this situation would depend entirely on how quickly Brandon and Sophia discovered their new reality, and how they chose to respond when fantasy collided with financial facts. Patricia, how long before they realize the full scope of what's been canceled? I'd estimate 24 hours. By Friday evening, they'll know their entire wedding has been dismantled. Some lessons about family relationships require dramatic consequences to be fully understood. And some young couples are about to learn that taking family for granted has costs that extend far beyond hurt feelings. Brandon and Sophia were about to discover exactly how expensive their desire for a drama-free wedding was going to be. Friday arrived with the kind of crisp November morning that would have been perfect for wedding planning, which made what was about to unfold even more poetic. I was in my garden, deadheading the last of the autumn roses, when my phone rang at 10:23 a.m. Sophia's name appeared on the screen, and I could hear the panic in her voice before she even spoke. Grandma. Eleanor, something's wrong. The Rosewood Estate just called. They said our booking was canceled. They're claiming you requested the cancellation. There has to be some kind of mistake. There's no mistake, Sophia, I said calmly. I canceled the venue yesterday, along with all the other wedding services. You canceled? Her voice cracked. What? Why would you do that? Because you uninvited me from the wedding I was paying for. A stunned silence stretched across the line, nearly 30 seconds, while Sophia processed what I just said. Grandma, you can't just cancel our wedding because you're upset about not being invited. We need those vendors. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Sophia, I'm not canceling your wedding, I replied evenly. You're perfectly free to get married whenever and wherever you choose. You're just planning and paying for it yourselves now. But we don't have $130,000 for the venue and everything else, she said desperately. You know we can't afford that. Then perhaps you should have considered your financial limitations before uninviting your primary source of wedding funding. Grandma Eleanor, this is insane. You're destroying our wedding because your feelings are hurt. I'm withdrawing financial support from people who don't want my presence in their lives. Sophia, you made it very clear that I create drama and family conflict. I'm simply removing that source of conflict from your celebration. I heard Brandon's voice in the background, low and insistent, clearly coaching her. Tell her that families support each other even when they disagree. Sophia repeated it aloud. Grandma, Brandon says families support each other even during disagreements. You're supposed to love us unconditionally. Sophia, I said gently. Unconditional love does not require unconditional financial support. I will always love you, but I will not fund celebrations that exclude me. This is emotional blackmail. No, Sophia. Emotional blackmail is what you and Brandon did when you uninvited me while expecting me to continue paying for your wedding. What I've done is simply apply the logical consequences of your decision. When the call ended, I realized something unsettling. Sophia genuinely hadn't understood that actions have consequences, especially when those actions involve treating generous family members as disposable once their usefulness has been extracted. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Brandon. Eleanor, we need to talk. What you've done is completely unreasonable and vindictive. Brandon, I've simply respected your decision that my presence would create problems. Now your wedding day will be problem-free. You know we can't afford to replace all those vendors. You're deliberately sabotaging our wedding out of spite. I'm withdrawing from a wedding where I'm not welcome. You convinced Sophia that family relationships should be subordinated to your comfort and preferences, I continued. Now you're discovering the financial implications of that philosophy. Eleanor, let's be practical, he said tightly. We made a mistake excluding you. If you restore the vendor contracts, we'll figure out a way to include you appropriately. What you've just offered, I said, is exactly what emotional blackmail sounds like. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. You're offering to tolerate my presence if I pay for your wedding. That tells me you still don't understand that family relationships aren't transactional. Eleanor, please be reasonable. Sophia is devastated. You're ruining the most important day of her life. I'm not ruining anything. You ruined Sophia's wedding when you convinced her to exclude the person funding it. I'm simply declining to finance my own exclusion. Can we meet in person to discuss this? There's nothing to discuss. You made your decision about my role in your lives. I've made mine about my financial responsibilities to people who don't value family relationships. That afternoon the calls started coming in. Maria from the bridal boutique was first. Mrs. Richardson, Sophia came in demanding her wedding dress. She claimed there was a misunderstanding about payment. I explained that the dress belongs to you until ownership is legally transferred. She became very upset. How upset? She threatened to call the police and accused us of holding her property hostage. I've been in this business for 20 years, and I've never seen a bride treat the person paying for her wedding with such disrespect. The florist called next. Mrs. Richardson, Brandon came into our shop demanding we honor the original contract, even though payment has been withdrawn. He seemed to believe verbal agreements override legal contracts. What did you tell him? That we require payment before providing services, and since his name isn't on any contracts, he has no legal standing to demand anything. He didn't take that well, she added. By evening, 6 different vendors had called with similar stories. Brandon and Sophia seemed genuinely shocked to discover that canceled payments canceled services, and that not being named on contracts meant they had no legal rights at all. Later, my attorney Patricia called. Brandon contacted our office demanding we reverse all cancellations. He claims you're acting irrationally due to emotional distress. And what did you tell him? That you're mentally competent, legally authorized to cancel contracts you entered into, and that his opinion of your emotional state is irrelevant. Did he threaten legal action? He mentioned consulting attorneys about elder abuse and financial manipulation. Any lawyer will tell him withdrawing financial support is not abuse. It's personal autonomy. Saturday morning brought the most interesting development yet. I was reading the newspaper when I heard car doors slam in my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw Brandon's Tesla parked behind a black Escalade I didn't recognize. The doorbell rang. Then aggressive knocking. Eleanor, we know you're in there. I opened the door to find Brandon standing beside an older man in an expensive suit, wearing the same entitled jawline and expression. Eleanor, Brandon said. This is my father, Richard Walsh. He wanted to discuss this situation with you directly. Richard Walsh extended his hand with the polished confidence of someone accustomed to solving problems with influence. Ms. Richardson, I understand there's been a misunderstanding regarding Brandon and Sophia's wedding arrangements. I'm here to help resolve this amicably. There's been no misunderstanding, I said. Your son convinced my granddaughter to exclude me from her wedding. I withdrew my financial support. The situation is resolved. Ms. Richardson, he said smoothly. Brandon explained the family dynamics involved. I believe we can find a compromise. Perhaps we adjust the guest arrangements to ensure you're comfortable attending. I looked at him and saw, suddenly and clearly, where Brandon's entitlement came from. A family that had never encountered a problem money couldn't solve. Your son doesn't want me at his wedding, I said. And I don't finance celebrations where I'm unwelcome. No compromise is necessary. Let's be practical, he pressed. You've already invested significantly. Walking away now means losing that investment. I've lost nothing, I replied, except the opportunity to fund people who don't respect family relationships. Some confrontations, I was learning, don't just resolve conflicts. They expose generational patterns of entitlement that explain exactly how men like Brandon grow up believing family exists to serve them without expecting respect in return. And some fathers were about to discover that their sons' mistakes had consequences that family money and influence couldn't remedy. Richard Walsh stood on my doorstep with the confidence of a man who had spent his entire career solving problems through corporate leverage and strategic intimidation. His expensive cologne and tailored suit announced someone unaccustomed to hearing the word no, especially from people he considered beneath his social and financial standing. "Ms. Richardson," he began smoothly, "I think you're making this situation more complicated than it needs to be. Brandon tells me you're upset about some miscommunication regarding the wedding invitations." "There was no miscommunication," I replied evenly. "Your son deliberately convinced my granddaughter to exclude me from the wedding I was funding because he believed my presence would create drama." Richard sighed. The practiced patience of a man used to smoothing over inconvenient objections. "Look, sometimes young people make poor decisions about family dynamics. Surely we can find a solution that doesn't involve destroying their wedding plans 3 weeks before the ceremony." "I'm not destroying anything," I said. "I'm simply declining to finance my own exclusion from a family celebration." His expression shifted, charm giving way to calculation, as he realized reason alone wouldn't work. "Ms. Richardson," he said carefully, "Brandon mentioned that you're recently widowed and living alone. Sometimes grief can affect judgment about family relationships. Perhaps you're not seeing this situation as clearly as you could." A chill ran through me at the casual implication that my decision stemmed from impaired judgment rather than justified anger. "My mental state is perfectly clear, Mr. Walsh. Your son disrespected me, influenced my granddaughter to do the same, and is now facing the financial consequences of that choice." "Eleanor," Brandon cut in, his voice slipping into a wheedling tone, "Dad can help us figure this out. His law firm handles family disputes all the time. This isn't a family dispute requiring legal intervention," I said. "This is a financial decision made by someone who was treated poorly by people seeking her generosity." Richard pulled out his phone and began typing, apparently researching something while standing on my front porch. "Ms. Richardson," he said after a moment, "public records show your property and business holdings. You're clearly a wealthy woman who can afford to honor commitments already made to these young people." "My wealth is irrelevant," I replied. "I could afford to fund a dozen weddings. I simply choose not to fund celebrations that exclude me. But canceling arrangements 3 weeks beforehand is unreasonable, potentially cruel, to your own granddaughter." "What's cruel?" I countered. "Is convincing a young woman to exclude her family while expecting their financial support. Your son created this situation through manipulation and disrespect." Richard's diplomatic facade finally cracked, revealing the aggressive businessman beneath. "Let me be direct. Invitations have been sent, commitments made, expectations built. Canceling now would be publicly embarrassing and damaging to their social and professional reputations." "Their reputations," I said calmly, "are their responsibility, just as their wedding is now their responsibility to fund." "I don't know what Brandon did to offend you," he pressed, "but surely we can resolve this without nuclear options that hurt innocent people." "The only innocent person here is Sophia," I replied, "who was manipulated by your son into making terrible decisions about family relationships." Brandon stepped forward, his composure finally cracking. "Eleanor, you're being completely unreasonable. We made one mistake about family dynamics, and you're destroying our entire wedding over it. You made a calculated decision to exclude me while keeping my money." I said. "That wasn't a mistake. That was manipulation. You're acting like a vindictive old woman who can't handle not being the center of attention." "Brandon," Richard snapped sharply, recognizing too late that his son had just handed me proof of the very disrespect I described. "No, Dad," Brandon shot back. "Someone needs to tell her the truth. She's always been controlling and demanding with Sophia. We finally set appropriate boundaries, and now she's throwing a tantrum." I looked at Brandon Walsh, handsome, privileged, utterly convinced his comfort mattered more than family, and realized reasoning with him was pointless. "Thank you, Brandon," I said quietly. "You've just confirmed that withdrawing my financial support was the correct decision." Richard grabbed his son's arm, trying to stop further damage. "Ms. Richardson," he said tightly, "Brandon is under tremendous stress. Young people sometimes express themselves poorly under pressure." "What Brandon expressed," I replied, "is his actual opinion of me. which explains perfectly why he wanted me excluded. I'm simply honoring that preference. What would it take? Richard asked after a pause. To restore the wedding arrangements. What do you need from Brandon and Sophia to proceed as planned? I need nothing, I said. They made their priorities clear. I adjusted my financial decisions accordingly. There's no apology or accommodation that would change your mind? I won't be manipulated into funding celebrations for people who see me as a problem to manage rather than family to value. Richard fell silent, clearly calculating whether any other form of pressure might work. I could cover the wedding expenses myself, he finally offered. That's generous, I said, but irrelevant. Your son and my granddaughter need to learn that actions have consequences. You're really going to let stubbornness ruin your granddaughter's wedding? I'm going to let your son explain to Sophia why his disrespect for her family ruined the wedding she dreamed about. When they finally left, driving away in luxury vehicles, frustrated that money and influence had failed, I understood that Brandon's entitlement wasn't an individual flaw. It was inherited. Richard Walsh had spent 30 minutes cycling through sympathy, reason, intimidation, bribery, and guilt, without once acknowledging that his son had behaved inappropriately or that my decision was justified. That afternoon Sophia called again. Her voice sounded hoarse from hours of crying. Grandma Eleanor, please. I'm begging you to reconsider. I know we made a mistake, but please don't punish me for Brandon's poor judgment. I'm not punishing you, I said gently. I'm teaching you both that family relationships have value. But the wedding is ruined. We can't afford to replace the vendors. Nothing like this is available 3 weeks out. Then perhaps you should postpone until you can plan and fund something independently. But everyone's flying in. Brandon's business partners. We told them about the Rosewood Estate ceremony. It will be humiliating to cancel or downgrade. Being humiliated by your own decisions, I said, is how people learn to make better ones. Grandma, please. I love you. I want you at my wedding. Can't we fix this? My heart softened at her distress, but I knew this conversation existed only because money was gone, not because understanding had arrived. Sophia, do you understand why I was hurt by your decision to exclude me? Was it because you were paying for everything? No, sweetheart. It was because for 8 years I've been your primary family, and you discarded me the moment Brandon convinced you I was inconvenient. I didn't mean to discard you, she said quickly. I just wanted Brandon to be comfortable at our wedding. And what about my comfort, Sophia? I asked quietly. What about my feelings about being excluded from one of the most important days of your life? For the first time since this crisis began, Sophia was silent for more than a few seconds, apparently actually considering my perspective rather than instinctively defending her decisions. Some granddaughters, I was learning, needed dramatic consequences to recognize that family relationships required reciprocal respect and consideration. Some lessons about love and loyalty could only be taught through the temporary withdrawal of security that had been taken for granted. Sunday evening brought an unexpected visitor to my front door. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize, blonde, expensively dressed, carrying herself with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she was about to deliver important information. When I opened the door, she introduced herself in a shaky voice that immediately caught my attention. Mrs. Richardson, I'm Emma Walsh. I think we need to talk about Brandon. I'm sorry, I said cautiously. I don't know who you are or how you're connected to this situation. I'm Brandon's wife. The words hit me like ice water. Excuse me. I'm legally married to Brandon Walsh. We've been married for 2 years, since 2021. I think you should know that before Sophia makes the biggest mistake of her life. I invited Emma into my living room, my mind racing with the implications of what she had just revealed. Brandon was already married, which meant his wedding to Sophia would be illegal and invalid. Emma, I said carefully, I need you to explain this slowly. You're saying that Brandon is currently married to you while planning to marry my granddaughter. Yes. She took a breath and folded her hands tightly in her lap. We got married for tax and business purposes when Brandon's influencer income started generating serious money. Our accountant recommended it for financial benefits, and we thought it would be easy to dissolve later if needed. But you never dissolved the marriage. Brandon kept postponing the divorce paperwork. He said it was complicated and expensive, and that we should wait until his business situation stabilized. Meanwhile, he was dating Sophia, and apparently planning this elaborate wedding ceremony. A mixture of rage and vindication washed over me as I realized Brandon's manipulation extended far beyond family dynamics into outright fraud and bigamy. "Emma," I asked, "why are you telling me this now?" "Because I found out about the wedding through his social media posts. And I've been watching the drama unfold over the past few days. When I saw that you'd canceled all the wedding vendors, I realized this was my chance to stop him from committing bigamy, while destroying both our lives." "How long have you known about Sophia?" "I've known he was dating someone for over a year, but I assumed it was casual. Brandon and I have an open marriage arrangement. We're married legally, but not romantically. But when I saw the engagement announcement and the wedding planning posts, I realized he was planning to commit a serious crime." Emma pulled out her phone and showed me photographs of legal documents, marriage certificates, and text conversations, undeniable evidence of her marriage to Brandon. "Mrs. Richardson," she said softly, "I don't want to hurt Sophia, but I also can't let Brandon commit bigamy using my legal marriage as his foundation. If he marries her while still married to me, both of them could face criminal charges." "Emma," I asked, "does Sophia know anything about you or your marriage to Brandon?" "Nothing. I've been completely secret from his family and social media presence. Brandon compartmentalized our business relationship from his personal life so thoroughly that most people don't even know I exist." I studied Emma's face, searching for signs of deception or ulterior motives. Instead, I saw genuine concern about the legal and ethical consequences of Brandon's actions. "What do you want me to do with this information?" I asked. "I want you to help me prevent Brandon from destroying multiple lives through his selfishness and fraud. Sophia deserves to know that the man she's planning to marry is already legally married to someone else." "Why haven't you told her directly?" "Because I'm Brandon's wife. Anything I say will look like jealousy or vindictiveness. But you're her grandmother. You've been protecting her from his manipulation. If this comes from you, she might actually listen." I realized Emma was offering the final piece of evidence. I needed to demonstrate that Brandon's character flaws extended far beyond disrespecting family members into criminal deception. "Are you willing to provide legal documentation of your marriage to Brandon?" I asked. "Absolutely." I brought copies of everything: marriage certificate, joint tax returns, shared business documents, bank account records. "I have 2 years of evidence that Brandon Walsh is legally married to me while planning to marry your granddaughter. What happens if Brandon discovers you've told me?" "He'll panic. He'll try to accelerate his plans or discredit me. But I can't continue being part of his deception. If he wants to marry Sophia, he needs to divorce me first and be honest about his situation." I spent the next hour reviewing Emma's documentation. It painted a clear picture of a business marriage Brandon had maintained for financial benefit while pursuing a romantic relationship he intended to formalize without dissolving his existing legal commitments. "This is extremely serious," I said. "Brandon would be committing bigamy, which is a felony in California." "I know," Emma replied. "That's why I'm here. I don't want Sophia facing criminal consequences for unknowingly participating in his fraud." "What would you like me to do?" "Show her the evidence. Let her make an informed decision about whether she wants to marry someone who's already married and has been lying to her for their entire relationship." "Are you prepared to testify if legal proceedings become necessary?" "Yes. I made a mistake agreeing to this arrangement, and I need to take responsibility for enabling his deception, even if that means facing consequences for my own poor judgment." After Emma left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by documentation proving that Brandon Walsh was not just manipulative and disrespectful, but a criminal planning to commit bigamy while defrauding my granddaughter. I called Patricia immediately, despite the late hour. "Patricia, I have new information about Brandon Walsh that changes everything." "What kind of information?" "He's already married, and has been for 2 years. His wedding to Sophia would constitute bigamy." "Eleanor," she said gravely, "that's extremely serious. Bigamy is a felony. Both parties can face criminal charges, even if one is unaware. I need to present this to Sophia in a way that protects her legally, while helping her understand the full scope of Brandon's deception. "This needs to be reported immediately," Patricia said. Sophia could unknowingly become an accessory to a serious crime. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized the next conversation with my granddaughter would involve far more than hurt feelings over wedding invitations. I was about to tell Sophia that the man she loved was a criminal, one who had lied to her about his marital status, and was prepared to involve her in felony bigamy. Some men, I was discovering, were capable of deception that extended far beyond family manipulation, into criminal fraud that could destroy multiple lives. And some grandmothers had the power to prevent their granddaughters from unknowingly participating in crimes with lifelong consequences. Tomorrow, Brandon Walsh's carefully constructed web of lies would begin to unravel completely, and Sophia would finally understand why I'd been trying to protect her from a man whose character flaws ran far deeper, and were far more dangerous, than simple disrespect for family relationships. Monday morning, I called Sophia at exactly 9 a.m., knowing she and Brandon would both be awake for their morning content creation routine, the carefully orchestrated social media posts that sustained their influencer income. "Grandma Eleanor," Sophia said immediately, "if you're calling about the wedding vendors again, we're handling everything ourselves. Brandon's father is helping us arrange new services. Sophia, I need you to come to my house immediately. There's something about Brandon that you need to know before you make any permanent decisions about your relationship." "What kind of something?" "Something that affects the legality of your marriage, Sophia. This is urgent, and it needs to be discussed in person." "Grandma, I don't have time for more drama about family relationships. We're dealing with a wedding crisis." "This isn't about family relationships," I said firmly. "This is about Brandon's legal status and your potential criminal liability if you proceed with this wedding." The word criminal caught Sophia's attention in a way emotional appeals never had. "Criminal? What are you talking about? Come to my house within the next hour. And bring Brandon with you. What I have to show you affects both your futures." "Grandma, you're scaring me." "Good," I replied. "You should be scared, Sophia. Trust me one more time and come here immediately." 45 minutes later, Brandon's Tesla pulled into my driveway. Both of them stepped out, their expressions ranging from confused to irritated as they approached my front door. "Eleanor," Brandon said stiffly, "Sophia says you have some kind of urgent legal information." His voice carried a defensive hostility that suggested he already suspected what this meeting involved. "Yes, Brandon," I replied calmly. "Information about your existing marriage to Emma Walsh." The color drained from Brandon's face so quickly that Sophia immediately noticed. "Marriage to who?" she asked sharply. "Brandon? What is she talking about?" "Sophia," I said, meeting her eyes. "Brandon has been legally married to Emma Walsh since 2021. He's been planning to marry you while still married to another woman, which constitutes bigamy, and would make your marriage ceremony legally invalid." Sophia looked between Brandon and me, panic growing in her eyes. "Brandon, is that true?" "It's complicated, Sophia," he said quickly. "Emma and I have a business arrangement, not a real marriage. It was purely for tax and financial benefits." "But you're legally married to her." "Technically, yes, but—" "There's no technically about legal marriage, Brandon," I interrupted, placing Emma's documentation on the coffee table. "Here's your marriage certificate, joint tax returns, shared business records, and bank account information covering 2 years of legal marriage to Emma Walsh." Sophia picked up the marriage certificate with trembling hands, reading the official document that proved Brandon had been legally married throughout their entire relationship. "Brandon," she whispered, "you've been married this whole time? While we were dating, while we got engaged, while we planned our wedding?" "Sophia, it's not what you think. Emma and I aren't romantically involved. It's purely a business arrangement that I've been planning to dissolve." "When, Brandon?" Sophia demanded. "When were you planning to dissolve it? Before or after you committed bigamy by marrying me?" "I was going to handle the divorce paperwork after our wedding ceremony. The timing just got complicated." I felt a cold satisfaction watching Brandon scramble as his criminal deception unraveled. "Sophia," I said gently, "bigamy is a felony in California. If you'd proceeded with this wedding, both you and Brandon could have faced criminal charges, even if you were unaware of his existing marriage." "Criminal charges?" Sophia repeated faintly. For getting married? Yes, I said. For participating in illegal bigamy. Brandon was planning to involve you in a serious crime, while keeping you ignorant of the legal risks. Sophia set the marriage certificate down and looked at Brandon with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete disillusionment replacing the adoration she'd clung to throughout their relationship. Explain to me, she said coldly, how you were planning to marry me while still married to someone else. Sophia, lots of people have complicated legal situations. I was going to straighten everything out after our ceremony. After our ceremony? She snapped. That would have been illegal. Brandon, you were planning to commit a crime using me as an unwitting accomplice. That's not how I saw it. That's exactly what you were doing, Sophia said, her voice rising. You were planning to make me part of your fraud without even telling me about the legal risks. Brandon's influencer composure cracked under the weight of documentation he couldn't deny. If you just let me handle the legal complications, he said, none of this would have been a problem. The legal complications exist because you've been lying to me about being married to another woman for our entire relationship. I didn't lie, he insisted. I just didn't mention Emma because she's irrelevant. She's irrelevant? Sophia said incredulously. She's your wife. Legally. Officially. How is your marriage to another woman irrelevant to our marriage? I watched as Sophia finally grasped the full scope of Brandon's deception, realizing his dishonesty went far beyond family dynamics into the core of his identity. Sophia, I said quietly, this is why I was concerned about Brandon's character. Men who lie about major life circumstances rarely limit their deception to one area. Grandma, you knew about this? I learned yesterday when Emma contacted me. She'd been watching the wedding drama and realized she couldn't let Brandon commit bigamy using their existing marriage. Emma contacted you? Sophia asked. Why? Because she doesn't want you to face criminal charges for unknowingly participating in Brandon's fraud. She's trying to protect you. Brandon stood abruptly, his carefully curated persona collapsing. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Emma and I can dissolve our marriage quickly if that's what everyone wants. You should have dissolved your marriage before proposing to another woman, Sophia said with icy finality. You should have been honest about your legal status before planning a wedding. Anything else is fraud. We can fix this, Brandon insisted. I'll file for divorce immediately, and we'll postpone the wedding until everything is legal. You're missing the point, Sophia replied. The problem isn't timing. The problem is that you lied to me about fundamental facts of your life, and tried to involve me in criminal activity. I wasn't trying to involve you in anything criminal. That's exactly what you did, she said. Bigamy is a crime whether you intended it or not. Sophia gathered Emma's documentation and looked at Brandon with unmistakable finality. I can't marry someone who lies about being married to other people. I can't trust someone who would expose me to criminal liability without my knowledge. And I can't build a life with someone whose solution to legal problems is more deception. You're overreacting, Brandon said weakly. This is fixable. No, Sophia replied. You destroyed any possibility of trust. As Brandon left my house, his carefully constructed life collapsing behind him, I realized Sophia had finally seen through the manipulation and charm to recognize the truth beneath it. Fundamental dishonesty and criminality. Grandma Eleanor, Sophia said after Brandon's Tesla disappeared down my driveway. I owe you an enormous apology. You were trying to protect me from someone who was planning to involve me in criminal fraud, and I accused you of creating drama. Sophia, I said gently, you were manipulated by someone who is very skilled at deception. That isn't your fault. But I should have listened more closely to your concerns instead of excluding you from my life. Some granddaughters, I was learning, needed dramatic, undeniable evidence of their partner's criminality before they could recognize manipulation disguised as love. And some lessons about trust and family loyalty required the complete exposure of deception before wisdom could be fully absorbed. Brandon Walsh's criminal fraud had been stopped, but the real work, rebuilding trust and repairing family relationships, was only beginning. The week following Brandon's exposure as a married man brought a cascade of revelations that demonstrated just how deeply his deception had infiltrated Sophia's life. As we sat together in my living room, Sorting through the remnants of their relationship, each discovery peeled back another layer of the fraud she had been living inside without realizing it. "Grandma Eleanor, look at this," Sophia said, holding up her laptop. Brandon's Instagram feed glowed on the screen. He's been posting about building a life with his soulmate while being legally married to Emma. Every romantic post about our relationship was technically a lie. "Sophia," I asked, "what troubles you most about discovering Brandon's marriage? The legal deception? The emotional betrayal? Or the complete dishonesty about who he really was?" She swallowed. "I thought I knew everything important about his life. But he had an entire legal identity he kept secret from me for 3 years." I watched as Sophia processed the realization that her entire relationship had been built on deliberate deception. I felt proud of her clarity. She was analyzing the situation instead of making excuses for Brandon's behavior. "Grandma," she said quietly, "there's something else I need to tell you. Last night, I called Emma to apologize for unknowingly participating in the situation." "What did Emma say?" "She said Brandon told her I was just a social media partnership for content creation. Not a real romantic relationship. He convinced her that our engagement was fake, designed to boost follower counts and sponsorship opportunities." The scope of Brandon's manipulation was becoming horrifyingly clear. He had lied to both women about the other, constructing parallel deceptions that allowed him to maintain multiple commitments without either woman understanding the full picture. "Emma also told me something that explains why Brandon was so determined to exclude you from our wedding." "What kind of explanation?" "He was planning to use our wedding as content for a documentary about influencer culture that he'd already sold to a streaming platform for $300,000. My stomach tightened. The narrative was supposed to be about young entrepreneurs building successful businesses and relationships independently, Sophia continued. "Your presence would have contradicted that story. Because I would have revealed the wedding was funded by family money," I said. "Yes. Brandon needed the illusion that we were self-made entrepreneurs, not young people supported by a wealthy family." A new level of anger washed over me. Brandon hadn't excluded me to avoid family tension. He'd done it to protect a fraudulent business narrative worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. "Sophia," I said carefully, "Brandon was planning to profit financially from your wedding while lying about how it was funded." "It's worse," she replied. "Emma said he already received advance payments from sponsors who believed they were supporting an authentic love story, not a bigamist's fake ceremony. What happens to those sponsorships now that the wedding is canceled?" "He has to return the advances and could face legal action. Emma says multiple companies are considering fraud charges now that everything's coming out." My phone rang, interrupting us. "Patricia Wells." "Eleanor," Patricia said. "I've been researching the criminal aspects of Brandon's situation. It's far more serious than we thought." "How much more serious?" "Brandon's marriage to Emma appears to have been fraudulent from the beginning. They never lived together, never filed joint insurance claims, and maintained completely separate finances, except where tax benefits were concerned." "What does that mean legally?" "It suggests the marriage itself may have been a sham designed to defraud the tax system. That's federal criminal fraud. Combined with attempted bigamy and the sponsorship deception, Brandon could be facing multiple felony charges." "What about Sophia's legal exposure?" "Minimal. She's an unknowing victim. But she should cooperate fully with investigators and avoid any appearance of protecting Brandon." After the call, I looked at Sophia and realized that, painful as it was, she had narrowly escaped legal catastrophe. "Sophia," I said, "you discovered this before marrying someone facing serious criminal charges. That matters." "I know," she said softly, "but I keep thinking about how completely I misjudged him. How did I miss all the signs? Because Brandon is sophisticated at manipulation. And because you trusted someone you loved. Being deceived by a skilled liar is not a reflection of your intelligence. It's evidence of his criminality." Tears filled her eyes. "I feel stupid for cutting you out of my life because of someone who was lying about everything. What are you learning about family relationships through all of this?" I asked. "That family members who love you ask hard questions because they want to protect you, not control you. And that people who try to isolate you from family are usually hiding something." That afternoon, Emma Walsh arrived unexpectedly, carrying a folder of documents. "Sophia," she said, "I wanted to apologize in person for my role in enabling Brandon, even if I didn't understand what he was really doing." "You tried to stop me from committing a crime," Sophia replied. "I should be thanking you." "There's more," Emma said. "Brandon's been contacting me nonstop. He wants me to lie about our marriage timeline to help him avoid charges." "What kind of lies?" I asked. "He wants me to say we were already divorced when he proposed, or that the marriage was never valid." She showed us the text messages, clear attempts to suborn perjury. "Are you going to help him?" Sophia asked. "Absolutely not," Emma said firmly. "I've already contacted the FBI about the tax fraud. I'm going to testify honestly." Sophia looked at her with real admiration. "You're risking consequences yourself," she said. "I made mistakes," Emma replied, "but I won't make things worse by covering up more crimes." After Emma left, Sophia and I spent the evening planning her future, one no longer shaped by a wedding or a man built entirely on lies. Finally, she asked, "Grandma, when you canceled the vendors, was it to teach me a lesson about family respect? Or did you suspect something worse?" I paused. "Initially," I said, "it was about family relationships and respect. But Sophia, I had been concerned about Brandon's character for months. Canceling the wedding preserved your options long before the more serious problems emerged. In doing so, I was protecting you from potential criminal involvement even before I knew about the marriage fraud. And you were protecting me from someone whose disrespect for family suggested deeper character flaws that would eventually surface." That evening, as we reviewed the financial documents that would be needed for potential criminal proceedings against Brandon, Sophia finally asked the question that had been building throughout our conversations. "Grandma Eleanor, when this is all over, and Brandon is facing the legal consequences of his crimes, what happens to us? Can we rebuild our relationship after I treated you so poorly?" "Sophia," I said gently, "our relationship never ended. You were manipulated into making poor decisions about family. But that doesn't change the fact that I love you and want what's best for your future." Even after she excluded me from her wedding and accused me of creating drama, especially after that, I understood that we were both learning painful but valuable lessons about manipulation, family loyalty, and the importance of asking hard questions about people who try to isolate us from those who love us. Some granddaughters, I was learning, became stronger and wiser after experiencing sophisticated manipulation from skilled criminals. And some family relationships were resilient enough to survive temporary deceptions when they were built on genuine love, rather than transactional convenience. Tomorrow, Brandon Walsh would begin facing criminal charges for multiple forms of fraud. But tonight, Sophia and I planned her future with the clarity that comes from recognizing that family members who ask hard questions usually do so because they are trying to protect, not control. 2 weeks after Brandon's criminal activities were exposed, Sophia and I sat in the district attorney's office as she provided testimony about her unknowing involvement in his fraudulent schemes. Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos was thorough and precise. "Ms. Richardson, your testimony regarding Mr. Walsh's concealment of his existing marriage provides crucial evidence for our bigamy charges," she explained. "Combined with the tax fraud evidence from Emma Walsh and the sponsorship fraud documentation, we're building a strong case for multiple felony counts." Sophia hesitated before asking, "What kind of sentence is Brandon facing if convicted?" Given the scope of the fraud, federal tax crimes, attempted bigamy, wire fraud related to sponsorship schemes, we're looking at potentially 15 to 20 years in federal prison. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Brandon would face serious consequences, but his actions had damaged multiple lives, including Sophia's trust in relationships and her confidence in her own judgment. After leaving the DA's office, we drove to the Rosewood Estate, one final visit before closing this chapter completely. "Grandma Eleanor," Sophia asked, "why did you want to come back here?" "Because this place represents both the dream you had and the nightmare Brandon created. I wanted you to see it again and decide whether you have any regrets about the wedding that didn't happen." We walked through the gardens where her reception would have been held, past the ceremony site where she would have unknowingly committed bigamy, through spaces designed to celebrate a relationship built entirely on deception. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I can't believe I was willing to exclude you from celebrating here with me. This should have been about family and love, not Brandon's social media business and fraudulent sponsorship deals. Sophia, I asked, what would you want if you decided to get married in the future, to someone who actually deserves you? Something completely different, she said. Smaller, more intimate, focused on the people who actually care about me, not people who want to use the celebration for content creation. And you'd want family present? I'd want you at the center of everything, because you're the person who protected me when I was too manipulated to protect myself. Later, as we sat on a bench overlooking the vineyard where wedding photographs would have been taken, Sophia asked the question that had been forming throughout our healing process. Grandma, when you canceled all the wedding vendors, were you hoping I'd apologize and reinvite you? Or were you genuinely prepared to let me get married without you? I chose my words carefully, knowing the answer would shape her understanding of love and boundaries for the rest of her life. Sophia, I was genuinely prepared to let you get married without me if that was what you truly wanted. But I wasn't prepared to finance my own exclusion from your life. What's the difference? The difference is that I would have respected your choice, but I wouldn't have enabled the belief that family members exist to provide financial support without receiving emotional respect. So, you would have loved me even if I'd married Brandon and excluded you permanently? I would have loved you, I said softly, but our relationship would have changed fundamentally. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional participation in choices that are harmful. She nodded slowly. What if I'd paid for the wedding myself and gone through with it? Then you would have learned important lessons about independence and consequences. And you likely would have discovered Brandon's criminality eventually. Sophia was quiet for several minutes, processing the realization that my decision had been about boundaries, not control. Grandma Eleanor, she said finally, I need to tell you something. Yesterday Brandon called me. What did he want? He wanted me to testify on his behalf. He wanted me to claim our relationship was real and that his marriage to Emma was purely business. He thought it might reduce his sentence. And what did you tell him? I told him I'd testify honestly, that I wouldn't help him avoid consequences for fraud that could have destroyed my life. I felt a surge of pride. How did he respond? He said families should support each other during difficult times, and that I was being vindictive by cooperating with prosecutors. The same argument he used when he wanted you to exclude me, but keep my financial support. Exactly. The same manipulation. She exhaled. It's terrifying how clearly I can see it now. What are you learning about manipulation? That manipulators frame reasonable boundaries as cruelty, and that anyone who tries to isolate you from family is usually afraid of the advice that would expose them. My phone buzzed with a message from Patricia Wells. Eleanor, thought you'd want to know. Brandon was arrested this morning on federal fraud charges. Multiple counts. Tax fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. Trial expected next year. I showed Sophia. She read it slowly, relief and sadness crossing her face. I'm glad he's facing consequences, she said. But I'm sad someone I loved was capable of this. That sadness, I told her, is proof of your capacity for genuine love, even when it isn't returned responsibly. She looked out over the vineyard. So what happens now? The wedding is canceled. The relationship is over. Who am I when I'm not being managed by someone else? Now, I said, you get to discover who you really are, making independent decisions based on your own values. And this time she would not be alone. I think I want to go back to school, finish my MBA, and build a career that doesn't depend on social media or Brandon's connections. That sounds like an excellent plan. Sophia, what kind of career interests you? Something that helps other people avoid the kind of deception I experienced. Maybe family law, financial crimes investigation, or victim advocacy. As we prepared to leave the Rosewood Estate for the final time, Sophia asked the question that would define our relationship going forward. Grandma Eleanor, I know I hurt you deeply by excluding you and choosing Brandon's manipulation over our family relationship. How do we rebuild trust between us? Sophia, trust is rebuilt through consistent actions over time, not through apologies or promises. Show me, through your choices, that you value family relationships and honest communication, and our trust will rebuild naturally. What if I make mistakes again? What if I'm not perfect at recognizing manipulation or setting appropriate boundaries? Then I'll be here to offer advice and support, just like I've always been. Sophia, the goal isn't perfection. It's growth and mutual respect. That evening, as we planned Sophia's return to graduate school and her future career focused on helping fraud victims, I realized that Brandon's criminality had ultimately led to opportunities for growth and purpose that neither of us could have anticipated. Grandma, in a strange way, I'm grateful that Brandon's deception was exposed before I married him. If we'd gone through with the wedding, I might have spent years being gradually isolated from you while unknowingly participating in his criminal enterprises. Sophia, some of the most valuable lessons in life come from our worst experiences, as long as we're willing to learn from them rather than just survive them. Some granddaughters I was learning emerge from sophisticated manipulation stronger, wiser, and more committed to family relationships based on honesty rather than convenience. And some criminal schemes ultimately create opportunities for growth and purpose that extend far beyond the immediate damage they cause. Tomorrow, Sophia would begin rebuilding her life with wisdom earned through surviving deception and choosing truth over comfort. Tonight, we would be grateful for family love, resilient enough to survive manipulation, strong enough to demand respect, and generous enough to forgive mistakes when they lead to genuine growth. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, I stood in the packed auditorium of UC Berkeley's law school, watching Sophia deliver the keynote address at their annual symposium on financial crimes and victim advocacy. She had completed her MBA in record time and was now pursuing a joint law degree focused on helping fraud victims rebuild their lives, a career path that emerged directly from her experience with Brandon's deception. Ladies and gentlemen, Sophia began, her voice carrying the confidence that comes from transforming personal trauma into professional purpose. 2 years ago, I was an unwitting victim of multiple forms of fraud perpetrated by someone I trusted completely. Today, I want to share what I learned about recognizing manipulation, protecting yourself from financial crimes, and rebuilding your life after discovering that your reality was built on systematic deception. The audience, law students, prosecutors, victim advocates, and fraud survivors, gave her their complete attention as she outlined the sophisticated nature of Brandon's crimes and how they were designed to exploit trust and family relationships. The man I planned to marry convinced me to exclude my grandmother from our wedding while she was funding the entire celebration. This wasn't just family drama. It was a calculated strategy to isolate me from the person most likely to ask hard questions about his background and motivations. I felt pride watching Sophia articulate insights that had taken months to develop, transforming her painful experience into education that could protect others. What I learned, she continued, is that financial predators don't just steal money. They steal your ability to trust your own judgment. They systematically undermine your confidence in family relationships, professional instincts, and personal boundaries until you become dependent on their validation and guidance. After the presentation, Sophia joined me for dinner at the same restaurant where we'd celebrated her college graduation 5 years earlier, before Brandon entered her life and nearly destroyed her connection to family and reality. Grandma Eleanor, I need to tell you something I've been thinking about since I started law school. What's that, sweetheart? When you canceled the wedding vendors, you weren't just protecting yourself from being excluded. You were protecting me from making the biggest mistake of my life. If I'd married Brandon, I would have become legally entangled with a criminal who could have destroyed my future completely. Sophia, I was primarily responding to being disrespected. But you're right. Canceling the wedding preserved your options when Brandon's criminality was exposed. More than that, if I'd gone through with the bigamous marriage ceremony, I could have faced criminal charges myself. Grandma, you literally saved me from potential prison time. I thought about the chain of events that had led from Brandon's disrespectful text message to Sophia's current career helping fraud victims, recognizing that sometimes the most painful experiences create the most valuable opportunities for growth and service. Sophia, what happened to Brandon's criminal case? He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison last month. Tax fraud, wire fraud, bigamy conspiracy, and multiple counts of financial crimes. Emma testified against him, which helped prosecutors understand the full scope of his schemes. How do you feel about his sentence? I feel like justice was served, and I feel grateful that I'm not spending the next 18 years visiting my husband in federal prison while trying to rebuild a life damaged by his criminality. What about Emma? How is she handling the aftermath? She completed her testimony and paid substantial penalties for tax fraud, but avoided prison because she cooperated fully. She actually reached out to apologize again for her role in enabling Brandon's deception. Are you in contact with her now? We have coffee occasionally. She's become something of a mentor as I study financial crimes law. Emma understands the psychology of fraud victims in ways most professors don't. Our conversation was interrupted by a text from Patricia Wells. Eleanor, thought you'd want to know. The civil case against Brandon's family trust was settled today. The Walsh family agreed to pay full restitution to fraud victims, including the vendors who lost money on the canceled wedding. I showed the message to Sophia, who read it with satisfaction. Grandma Richard Walsh spent months trying to protect Brandon, but ultimately his family had to pay for the damage he caused. Even privilege and wealth couldn't shield him from accountability. What does this settlement mean for you personally? It means closure. The vendors have been compensated, and I can focus completely on my future, rather than litigation about the past. As we finished dinner, Sophia handed me a wrapped gift she'd been carrying since the law school presentation. Grandma, this is something I've been working on for months. I wanted you to have the first copy. Inside was a bound manuscript titled Expensive Lessons: How Family Boundaries Expose Financial Fraud, with Sophia Richardson listed as the author. You wrote a book about our experience. I wrote a guide for families about recognizing financial manipulation, setting boundaries with adult children, and protecting against fraud that targets family relationships. As Sophia gathered her belongings and prepared to return to her apartment near law school, I realized Brandon's manipulation had inadvertently created something far more valuable than any wedding celebration: a granddaughter who understands the difference between love and control, a career built on protecting others from fraud, and a family relationship strengthened by choosing truth over convenience. Some criminals, I learned, accidentally create the opposite of what they intend. When their victims are strong enough to transform trauma into wisdom, betrayal into purpose, and crisis into clarity. Brandon Walsh tried to isolate Sophia and exploit her. Instead, he strengthened our bond and inspired her life's work. Some justice, it turns out, is poetic in ways criminals could never anticipate. The end.